recorded. Cool, thanks. We'll post it onto our site after this call. Oops. And please stay on mute, but know that we'll have lots of time for you to unmute and share your feedback, because that's what this session is all about. Usually it's easy for people to take turns, but feel free to raise your hand if you have something to say or put something in the chat. But yeah, the point of this is to hear from you. So today we have the Department of Energy to talk about incentives that would work well with our homeownership development funding. So I'll pass it off to them in a second. We're gonna also share updates and changes that we've made based on your feedback and what we spoke about last time we met in September. And then we're going to present a whole bunch of application evaluation criteria and ask for your feedback. And just a warning that it's going to be a lot, but we will be posting this afterwards and give you some time to process. And then we'll talk about next steps. So welcome, Department of Energy. And with that, I'll pass it over to Katie Milton and Patricia Phillips to share more about their programs. Thanks so much. And I will unshare.
Awesome, thank you. I'll get that going in just a second. Do we see it? No, we do not. Sorry, one moment.
We're more used to using Teams.
Exactly. We are used to Teams, folks. So just give me one moment. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so that and then start. All right, can you guys see it now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Awesome. Sorry, took a minute there. So yes, welcome. We are Oregon Department of Energy. I, again, is Katie Milton. I am a solar rebate assistant here at Oregon Department of Energy, work for our Oregon and Solar and Storage Rebate Program.
I'm Patricia Phillips. I help with a range of our energy assistance programs, and I'm here to help present this program.
Perfect. So yes, we kind of want to just do a quick overview of our program here. It's going to be short and sweet. We will keep questions for the end, try to mostly, but just keep some notes and we'll try to answer the best we can when we're finished. So first off, we kind of just want to do some overview. The Oregon and Solar Storage Rebate Program is designed to help expand access to renewable energy. So we're really big on saving on solar. So residential customers across Oregon can save up to $5,000 for solar and up to $2,500 for battery and storage paired with solar. And our low-income service providers, we call them lists, can save up to $30,000 for solar and up to $15,000 for battery and storage paired with solar. Basically, to sum it up, how it works, rebates are issued to ODO-approved contractors who install the systems, and the savings goes directly to the customer on the net cost of the system. So the contractor receives the rebate, but it is deducted off the contract for the customer. That kind of is a big picture of what we do beginning to end. Patricia was going to be dropping in a link, kind of just of our solar and storage rebate program general website. Okay, we have 3 customer types. One is low and moderate income, or LMI. I just wanted to show you all three, but it really sounds like that you'll be focusing on the LISP, which is our low income service provider one. We also have one that is called not low and moderate income, non-LMI. Kind of briefly, the low and moderate income is focused on homeowners that qualify by Oregon State median income guidelines and household sizes. So like, again, it's not something that we'll be focusing on here much. And our not low to moderate is pretty much a homeowner that can qualify for with no eligibility requirements. So the low MI has a little bit more eligibility requirements, and not low MI covers pretty much anybody that can submit an application for us. So what is considered a low and moderate income? Just wanted to touch on these 3 points here. The 3 ways that you can qualify to be a low moderate income is number 1 is the homeowner is determined eligible for certain Oregon and housing and community service programs with OHCS. Number 2, or I'm sorry, the number 1 is that there's 3 programs that they can qualify under. I know that there's low income home energy assistant program, low income Oregon Energy Assistant Program, and low income weatherization assistance program. So those are the 3 that homeowners can qualify for in our LMI. Number 2 is the homeowner is determined eligible for certain Oregon Department of Human Services. So this would be DHS. This would be kind of, Medicaid, SNAP benefits is normally what they're considered. They would qualify for. And the other one is Oregon Health Authority programs, OHA. So again, Medicaid, DHS would be SNAP benefits. And then the third one is the homeowner can prove qualifying household income with an Oregon Department of Revenue tax transcript. This is, again, off of our Oregon State median income guidelines to determine eligibility. This is a little bit more detailed, but I just wanted to give you guys kind of a sum up of our LMI. Really, let's go on to the next slide to focus on what you guys as developers would mainly fall under these 2 eligibility requirements, depending on obviously certain projects and scenarios, one or the other. What is considered low income service provider? So developers / owners of affordable housing that are eligible for public assistance administered by Oregon Housing and Community Services. So I kind of broke this down into 2 kind of ways that you guys would qualify. Under that is the owner of a solar electric system or paired solar and storage system that is located and generated electrical energy for a dwelling that has received public assistance under one or more housing development or rental assistance programs administered by OHCS and offsets electrical utility expenses incurred by one or more low and moderate income tenants. That is one way to qualify. The other one is kind of a B category, but it's a community service organization whose primary purpose is to offer health, dental, social, financial, energy conservation, or other assistive services to households below 100% of the state median income by household. I put a bulletin point of community land trust. It sounds like that you guys are familiar with the CLT model. If not, it typically involves the developer owning the land and selling the home and setting up a long-term ground lease with the owner of the home. We at Oregon Department of Energy, we interpretate the low-income service provider to include community land trust, where the purpose or mission of the trust is to benefit low and moderate income people or households through that availability of affordable housing, and where the trust has published eligible income guidelines that are below that 100% state median income guideline. You can find actually kind of more information on this on our ODO website of our administrative rules. Patricia will be dropping in this link into the chat for our administrative rules and also some more LISP information if you're wanting to know more about LISP. And continue. So this is a really short breakdown of solar and rebate amounts and calculations. I was just going to go over it very briefly. I wanted to start off with the low income service provider. So they are broken down by different, I'm sorry, percentages. There's one for the list. It's 75 cents per watt of installed capacity or up to 50% of the net cost or $30,000. So this really depends on how many kilowatts a system is to know how much the rebate is going to be. For the category of LMI, it's $1.80 per watt of installed capacity up to 60% of the net cost or a max of $5,000, whichever is less. And we have two options for the not low moderate income. One is our 50 cent per watt of installed capacity up to 40% or max at 5,000, whichever is less, or the 20% watt. There is a difference in between this 50 and 20, but like I said, you guys wouldn't really qualify for under the not low and moderate income, but as developers, you probably would be focused on the low income service providers. But one is for the 20% if if the customer does qualify for a utility incentive, and the 50 cents is somebody that doesn't qualify for a utility incentive. Can get more into that if you have more questions on that in the question section. That's not a problem. Let's see. Basically, actually, I wanted to add one more note. All applications, even low-income service provider applications, can possibly qualify for a utility incentive. A utility incentive for us comes from the utility company of where the specific project is located at. So depending on the location, there may or may not be a utility incentive. So it's not just for not low, moderate income. It could be for low-income service providers as well. We also have a storage and battery rebates. I didn't know, we kind of just wanted to throw this in there just to give you guys some information that we do rebates on storage batteries. So these are the breakdowns of that. The low income service provider, $300 per watt installed capacity, or a max at $15,000, whichever is less. The low and moderate income is $300 also per watt of installed capacity, and the max is $2,500, whichever is less. And the not low to moderate is the exact same, $300 per watt installed capacity, $2,500, which at max. How to become an approved contractor. There are three ways, I'm sorry, to be an approved contractor with us. First one is our ETO. When a contractor states that they're ETO, Solar Trade Ally, we ask them basically to approve, to send us their approval letter from ETO. So one way to be vetted with us for an approved contractor is that way. Another way is, secondly, the PVIP. It's PV Installation Professional Certification, administered by NABCEP. That's a mouthful. The NABCEP stands for North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. So that's another way. If they sent in their certification to us showing that they got that would be another way to be approved contract with us. The last one is our PVIS and PVTS. This stands for PV Installer Specialist, certified by the NABCEP, and a person with an NABCEP PV Technical Cell Certification. What a mouthful, but those two are hand in hand together. They can't be separated, so we'd have to have both of those for an approved contractor. If you're interested, any developer out there is interested in being a approved contract with us, you can sign up through our Odos customer service portal. And I know that Patricia will be dropping two links into the chat, one approved for an approved list that we already have all of our approved contractors already, and how to become an approved contractor with us. What else should I know? So our solar and storage installations must be installed on real property. So no floating homes, no manufactured homes would qualify for this sort of program. We've had a crazy one for a floating boat. People were putting solar on a boat. I thought that was funny. But sort of things like that, those would not qualify. Rebates are issued to approved contractors who pass the savings on to the customer. I always reiterate this one because I do get a lot of people that call in and say, we didn't receive our rebate. And I'm like, it goes to the contractor that has that savings off for your contract. So that's sometimes confusing for people. Another one to know is the 20 reservation limit per customer type. We have two categories that actually fall for this. Our LISP, or so our low income service provider, and our LMI actually fall under one, so a total of 20. And then our non-LMI falls under a 20. So technically the contractor could have a total of 40 projects going on. If they hit that limit, they are denied an application because that is one of our administrative rules. They have to have 20 in each bucket, if no more than that. But that is a big one that I always like to point out of something that everyone should know. Another very, very important one is the contractor must submit a reservation application before starting construction. This is huge. It just needs to be submitted with us before anything has gone forward with a project. As long as that reservation is in with us, it is good to go and get started on. Another one is in case of a paired solar and storage system, they must be purchased together by the same approved contractor. I have seen this quite a few as well, where somebody had bought something from a different contractor that doesn't work for this program. We have to have the contractor, everything needs to be purchased through the same contractor. Something that I'd like to bring up is possible future changes that we kind of have coming. They're still in the rulemaking process, but just wanted to throw that out there. The number of reservation limits may change in the near future, and the timing of when storage and battery may be paid out. They're normally paid out together right now for the solar and storage, but it may be separated in the near future. There also may be a reduction in the LMI residential rebate number. So we have a 50% LMI option that is with incentives, no incentives. They may be changing that to 30 instead of 50. These changes, like I said, are still in the rulemaking process and have not gone through legislation yet, but these are proposed changes to begin in January of 2024. I just wanted to say thank you to OHCS for again letting us share some information about our program. If you're wanting to know more about this program, please feel free to reach out to us. Here we have our here we have our phone number and direct email to our solar and storage rebate program, and happy to answer some questions as well. We also have on here our solar and storage rebate program website. If you're wanting to know more about information, if you're really interested in becoming an approved contractor with us, we put that all out there. So is there any questions?
Katie, I see a question in the chat from Amy.
Mhm.
He says, are there any restrictions related to the electrical service provider? And then also, is there a reservation limit of 20 per year or total for the program?
There is no like limit, excuse me, for like a year. If they have 20 in the bucket for reservations, and let's say one got paid out, it drops off of their reservation limit. So they would have 19. So a contractor would be able to go in and submit another application to get that total for 20. So it's not per year, it's just kind of cycling through that we just keep it at that limit of 20. But they can, I mean, contractors can maintain at that 20 the entire time. And as long as they keep sending out rebate requests and getting those approved, the cycle can continue. Sorry, the other part of that was, is there any restrictions related to electrical service provider? I guess I don't know what is she, I guess I don't understand that part of the question. I'm sorry. For the electrical.
I'm guessing, and feel free to come off mute, Amy, but like, does it have to be a house service by PGE, or her example is an electric co-op eligible?
So that's really for utility incentives. We work hand in hand with ETO, and their big ones are the Pacific Pacific Power and PGE. So those two right there get a lot of utility incentives that we see. So basically, they're stacked with our ODO rebate and the utility incentive. So I don't know the ETO's restrictions for PGE and what they have to qualify for. I would reach out to them for those, but I know that they offer them.
Okay, but your program doesn't have restrictions based on.
Not off of based off of no, like no, not at all.
And then Sarah asks, the rebate is 30,000 per what? Is that per unit, per project? How do you categorize that?
Not a problem. Yeah, for our low income service provider, it is per application, per what they're submitting per project. So it could be just one standing single family home, say you will, that would be the limit for that.
Can I clarify? So say a developer is building 50 townhomes, what can they apply for?
Oh, I see. So if there's 50 townhomes, they probably would have different types, probably 50 or whatever, how many townhomes there is, I'd say 50 applications. So they probably wouldn't all reach that 30,000 due to the kilowatts that they had for the solar, but they each would be getting an amount of solar rebates. So they all would qualify. They would just have to go through our application process, submit a reservation, and yeah, that they would just be broken down into smaller pieces, obviously.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any final questions for Katie or Patricia while we have them? Okay, well, thank you so much. And thanks for supplying your contact. Oh, do you also rebate heat pumps? I have a feeling that Patricia might want to answer that.
So we currently have a program for rental homes. There is another program called the Community Housing. It's more for homeowners. And that is something that's going to be done through regional entities. So it's not quite going yet, but it's something we're working on. And then later on, there will be other funds coming through the Inflation Reduction Act. So these are very nebulous, but right now we do have heat pumps. We do rebate heat pumps for rental homes, but not at this moment for homeowners or for LISP. So yeah, great question.
Okay, well, thank you again for joining us, and I hope that some of the folks on the call are able to take advantage of these incentives to pair with the program that hopefully they'll be applying for that we're going to talk about next. So thanks so much.
Great. Thank you
Awesome.
very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll take the next slide. I just need a moment to share my screen. All right. And I'll just echo my thanks to Katie and Patricia for being here today and presenting to everyone. We do appreciate you. So I'd like to turn our conversation back to the NOFA and start with a reminder on the funding opportunity and timing. For anyone on the call who may be new to our processes, the NOFA is the Notice of Funding Availability. This is the process where we're able to offer funds to developers building their homes. We're able to offer funding to the community land trusts or developers using some other ground lease model, such as condos. Next year's NOFA will include $40 million in LIFT funds and $5 million in LIFT supplemental funds. October is the final month of our partner engagement and feedback sessions as we work to finish up the development of the NOFA. The rest of this year will be focused on internal feedback and approvals. We expect to publish the NOFA in January and will be accepting and reviewing applications on a rolling basis through September of 2024. We do have a few updates from the last meeting. The first you'll be pleased to hear is that after hearing your feedback on the idea of retainage, we've decided to not require this as a general policy. Instead, we'll have this more as an option for developments that might be considered high risk. We're working right now with DOJ to understand what they consider high risk and hope to include that feedback in the final NOFA document. Based on the feedback we received at the last meeting, it did sound like most of you were in agreement with our definitions of small, emerging, and rural developers. So we've not made any changes to this policy or this piece of the NOFA. For those of you who weren't able to attend the last meeting or watch the recording, we'll be setting aside half of the LIFT funding for developers who meet the definition of small, emerging, or rural here on this slide. This is to ensure that the funds will be available to developments that might not have the capacity, staff, or opportunity to compete with larger organizations on a first-come, first-served basis. These funds will be released to all applicants the second quarter or at the second quarter evaluation, so in June of 2024. As a reminder, due to the limited amount of LIFT supplemental funds that we received, we'll be limiting this resource to culturally specific organizations, organizations that qualify for the small, emerging, and rural set aside, and as an additional incentive to first-time LIFT applicants. We heard your feedback that the amount that we proposed was too small to make a difference for rural developments, especially. So we will be increasing the allowable amount per home. Culturally specific and rural applicants can apply for up to 100,000 per unit, up to 800,000 total. And other qualifying applicants can apply for 50,000 per unit, up to 600,000 total. I'd also like to remind you that the total is per entity, not per project application. And then as stated in our last presentation, we'll consider reassessing this at the 6-month mark if most of the funds haven't been used by that point. And now I'll pass it over to Talia to get us started on our next topic.
Great, thanks, Jessica. So you can go to the next slide. We're going to go in depth on what the application is going to look like and what you'll be evaluated on. And this represents just a general shift that Jessica will talk about more, but we're moving away from a competitive process to a rolling process. And the application components for those that applied last year will look very similar, just some updated questions and categories. And so that we'll still have a pre-application, but unlike last year, everybody doesn't need to get in their pre-application by a specific time, since people will be applying at different times. We just recommend that you get your pre-application in a few weeks before you plan to submit your application, because one of the uses of the pre-application is for us to set up a Perform Work Center for you, which is how we get all your documents for your application. So the pre-application will include an eligibility screening to make sure this opportunity makes sense for you, basic project information so we know what you're coming in for your ask. And then the application will include a detailed Excel workbook that has your pro forma and development schedule, along with some narrative questions and accompanying documents to back up your application. So very similar to last time, just some of the content will be different. And if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to provide a disclaimer for the rest of the slides that everything is still in draft form. So please don't, we'll post these slides afterwards, but don't take them as finalized when you look at them. And, they are meant to help you start preparing for the NOFA, and as well as give us feedback, because there's still time to shape our criteria, but they are not set in stone. So we reserve the right to update and change criteria prior to release of the NOFA. Go to the next slide. And so part of the part of the criteria will be pass fail. So either you meet the requirements or you don't. And then part of it will be allowing you to gain points. And so the preliminary criteria are very much the same as last year. So if you go onto our homeownership development website and look at the application from last year, and I can post the link in a second, you'll see very similar things. And that will give you an idea of what we're looking for. And I won't read all of them here, but just so you know, some changes to the preliminary criteria are in red. So we will be asking for your appraisal so that we're able to get an accurate amount of the request and be able to distribute the funds more equitably. You did submit preliminary site plans in the past, and just the stipulation is here is that they're professionally prepared and they reflect the number of homes that you're proposing in your application. And then the last new thing is just that we're seeking to look at your bylaws specifically so we can make sure that in the case of a dissolution, the portfolio will be assigned to another entity with a similar mission. So that kind of adds assurance for the security of the LIFT funds. And Sarah, I see you asked a question for culturally specific and rural organizations. The funding cap is, what was the funding cap total per project? So total per entity, it was $800,000.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Okay. And you can go to the next slide, Jessica. And I think it's you next.
If I could find my unmute button, sorry, thank you. All right, thanks, Talia. So the bulk of our feedback request is going to focus on the actual scoring criteria of the NOFA. We're looking to move away from more subjective evaluations and into a more objective scoring framework so that in theory, anyone who looks at your project would be able to score it within just a few points of each other. Since this will not be a competitive NOFA, we will not have one single score for the application. Instead, we'll have 6 major categories, each with its own minimum score that needs to be met. Those categories are here, which are development capacity, development experience, equity and community engagement, financial viability, project details, and stewardship experience. We're still debating scoring and didn't want to really settle on anything until after this feedback session. So we've included some kind of imaginary sample scores here to show what this table might look like in the final NOFA. To kind of summarize how this works, each category will have its own bank of potential points that can be earned in a variety of ways. That's reflected in the total points available column. Your project will need to meet the applicable minimum number of points. So small, emerging, and rural developers would have a lower minimum threshold to be more equitable to the varying opportunities available to different sized and located organizations. So our intent here is to build this in a way that if your organization doesn't meet one of our criteria, you might still be able to, or you should still be able to earn your minimum through other means. It might require some additional work, but our hope is that most organizations should be able to meet these minimums. Sorry. So as a warning, there is going to be a lot of content in this slide and those moving forward. We'll be sending this PowerPoint out to everyone shortly after this meeting. If you'd prefer to have time to read and digest this information, and then you can email us any feedback. So let's start with developer capacity. This scoring category will answer 3 key questions. Do you have a history that supports your current capacity? Do you have enough staff to manage your current capacity or your current pipeline? And do you have the financial stability and capacity to manage this project? The organizational capacity is fairly simple. You'll submit a development project history over the last 10 years and your current and upcoming pipeline. If your current pipeline is similar or a reasonable growth over your historic developments, then you'll get full points, with diminishing points with less capacity. During a previous feedback session on this, more than one response suggested that a project manager should not have more than 3 projects. We'll want to dive into that a little bit more and make sure that your project managers also have the experience to manage the number and size of projects, and that they aren't managing, for example, 3 projects and also running your finance team. But in general, if your staff have an appropriate workload, you should receive all or most of these points. Financial stability is one area we're hoping to get some feedback. Right now, we are awarding points if you have had your financials audited, and then taking away points up to that awarded amount based on the number, severity, and resolution of any findings. So you couldn't lose points below if you didn't have the audit at all. However, we're worried that, excuse me, we are worried that this may provide extra points to larger organizations, and we don't have any stability evaluation for organizations that don't need to have their financials audited. So your feedback here would be especially helpful. Financial capacity will focus on ratios and generally ensuring that your organization is not operating on a deficit. I want to specifically point out the guarantor line here. This is not mandatory. You do not need a guarantor to pass this section. And instead, we're offering it as an option to organizations that might be struggling to meet the other criteria. The last piece here is something that we thought of based on some feedback we received when we asked you about the experience and capacity evaluations before. What we're calling the gap mitigation narrative will be a write-up that you can provide in your application where you self-identify any gaps you may have and explain how you're mitigating the risk for that. An example of this would be you're taking on way more capacity than you have in the past, which will impact your scoring negatively, but you're actually able to do this because you received a huge grant and have hired 3 additional staff members. Or in a less clear-cut example, maybe your cash flow was in the red last year, which would reduce your points, but you've implemented a new budgeting plan to fix the cash flow over the next couple of years. Essentially, this is an opportunity to gain back some of the points that you might have lost in other categories. It's not mandatory. If you know that you'll meet all these requirements, you won't need to submit one. So just a reminder, the highlights on these pages are things that we're specifically looking for feedback on, but we're here to hear any feedback or questions you might have on these topics. So I will turn it over to you all for your thoughts.
See a hand from Jerry.
Can you hear me? So a number of months ago, we were coached that there had been a kind of an oops that happened where they realized that the OHCS needed to only award to nonprofits. So a number of us had to quickly pivot around and set up nonprofits and go through the 501c3, which we've done. But we realized that, as what you were just saying, we have absolutely no history because we started in September as far as being nonprofits. Now we're working with a developer who has very significant history. So I don't understand exactly how you're going to rate all of that. If you're saying, okay, what is your organizational history? It sounds like that's going to discriminate against the new organizations, but maybe you have a workaround that I don't understand.
Sure. So that's why we have the multiple categories. So it's possible you don't have any organizational capacity, but you mentioned you had a good partnership. So that would get you a good amount of points there. And then assuming that the staff that you have in the nonprofit are experienced, that should get you a significant amount of points too. It sounds like this new organization might qualify as an emerging developer. So that would mean that you also would have a lower threshold that you would need to meet to reach this. So our thoughts on this would have all of those additional factors, making sure that you met those goals.
I did have one more question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So a number of months ago in the previous round, the previous NOFA round, I know there was at least one organization that was awarded $45 million for building condominiums. And am I right in what I heard today that your maximum now is $600,000 per entity? That's a lot different than 45 million. So I want to understand, are you really limiting to 600,000 for construction?
And I can take this one, Jessica. So first, we've never funded any homeownership project, $45 million. That would be a rather large project, but so maybe that was under the rental NOFA. And there are no limits to the amount that you can apply for the LIFT funds. The caps that you saw in the previous slide are related to the general funds, which we only have 5 million of. So we're seeking to, have these very narrow eligibility definitions, and those funds will just be added on to the LIFT award. And I do want to remind everybody that the LIFT awards are limited by the appraised value of the land plus infrastructure. So we can't base the award off the project costs. It's really off the land. And so part of the LIFT supplemental is meant to help offset the difference, especially for rural projects that appraise low and don't qualify for as much LIFT funds to cover their construction costs, but it's not going to cover all your costs.
Right. So for example, if we had a project where we were able to acquire the land for approximately $1 million, and then the building of 2 condominium buildings that would each have 45 units in them for about, say, $16 million, that would be, are you saying that you would only be applying the LIFT funds to the purchase of the land?
The LIFT funds could be applied to any part of the project costs, and we can point you towards our eligible project costs, but the amount that you qualify for is limited by the appraised value of the land, which is not with the buildings on it. So land plus site improvements or site work.
Thank you.
Any other questions on capacity?
All right, I'll go ahead and move on then. All right. So the next category is developer experience. Walking through these steps again. First, we'll want to see if your organization is experienced in similar developments. We'll use that same 10-year development history in the last category, and maximum points will be awarded if you've completed at least 3 similar projects or have shown a growth trajectory over time. We'll develop a more structured basis for a reduction in points that considers both the number of projects and the similarity of projects. Just like with the last one, we're aware we'll have a lot of new organizations, and again, we'll have all these additional categories after that would hopefully make up for not having a lot of organization experience. We'll also evaluate your staff. So we're trying to take a different approach now than we positioned or than we posited before based on your feedback. Our thoughts are that we would have a number of different roles in the organization that are typically needed for a full development project. We'll have you submit bios for the staff or consultants filling these roles, and we'll award points for those roles that have staff members with at least 5 years experience, or fewer points for those filled with at least 3 years experience. We're thinking we can have some flexibility and include board members for smaller organizations. And we're still in discussions about how we'd want to consider staff members with significantly more than 5 years of experience, or how we would manage staff members who would fill more than one role. Your feedback on that would also be appreciated. Additionally, we'll want to know if there's been any major turnover in the last year that might impact the project and what's being done about that. Your feedback on how we might score that would be helpful too. For partnerships, we're still working on the point system, but in general, we do want to award you points for formally bringing an experienced partner into the project. We'll want to see a formal partnership in the form of something like an MOU and a brief explanation of any gaps that they might fill in your own experience or how the partnership would otherwise benefit the project. We'll consider the gap mitigation narrative in this section as well, focusing specifically on the categories in this section. And we'll also plan to award a small bonus to any pre-development and capacity building grants awardees if their grant was either to generally build capacity or pre-development for the project proposed. Is there any feedback or questions on this category?
I'll chime in, Jessica. This is Joe from Habitat in Portland region. With the staff experience category, I think it would probably just help to define what significant means. Like if you're talking about a certain amount of turnover, like more than one staff, or and then maybe the level of turnover, like maybe define it as being at a certain leadership level or higher. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think what we're leaning towards is a certain leadership level, or also maybe like a certain percentage of turnover recently, you know, if a whole department got phased out or something.
Can I add to that, chime in?
Of course.
This is Sarah from Habitat for Humanity of Oregon. I actually had sort of the same question. If it's a small organization that has like new leadership, so a new executive director has come on in the last 6 months, will there be a place? It would be good. I would think it would be good to describe that, because that could look different according to like the size of the organization or even the size of the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have noted here applicant would provide a plan for preserving institutional consistency. So we were thinking, you know, a note on turnover, and then also what that looks like for the organization, what they're taking to mitigate issues caused by the turnover, things like that.
Okay.
So we are going to look into that. We're just a little stuck on what the scoring for that would look like, or if it is anything at all.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or feedback or comments?
I mean, since you are seeking feedback and you mentioned the scoring, I mean, my impression, I mean, I haven't deliberated on this for very long, but is maybe for this category, it really could be like evaluated on like sort of a pass fail, because if you try and get into points, I feel like you're going to be comparing apples to oranges, like between different applicants. So that's all.
Thank you. All right. Hearing nothing else, I will pass the next slide over to Talia. You're on mute.
Thank you. Okay, so the next section is a longer one. And a lot looks similar to how we scored last year for those that applied, but we're also just seeking more data-based answers. So note that not all of it says application question, but it might look more like a table in your Excel sheet rather than providing a long narrative. So I know this looks like a lot, but just know that not every one of these is, you know, you're answering in paragraphs. So we're asking you what's the demographic makeup of your staff and board to see if it's representative of the target population and community. Do you have a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan or an equity plan for your organization? And then a lot of the next set of questions is really looking at how you are holistically working with the populations that you plan to serve, and what does that process look like, so we understand. So who is your target population? What's your track record of serving that target population? You already will be telling us what percentage AMI the units will plan to target. And then things like community-centered design. So how did you engage the community in the design of the project? How did that feedback influence the design? Were people paid? And if you go to the next one, I'll just walk through the whole cycle and we can flip back to this if need be, but describe, you know, the outreach plan. How are people identified and selected? How is the home buyer informed about how a shared equity model works, including the resale value? What types of pre and post purchase support are provided to home buyers? Is that through a partnership? So that's kind of the life cycle of how you might work with the home buyers once the homes are built or while they're in construction. So we're just looking for details on that. And then we've heard a lot of feedback about MWESB. We reduced the number of questions compared to last year, and are really looking, you know, you would get an extra point if the applicant plans to exceed the regional goal. If your GC is a MWESB CSDVBE contractor, or if they would qualify as one, even if they're not certified, and then just what steps will you take to advertise the opportunity to firms that would qualify. So that we know that this category presents challenges depending on your geography. So we still want to ask about it, but it's not a huge part of this category. More, we're looking to see that there is a plan for kind of the holistic engagement of the community. So you know who you're targeting, you know how you're supporting them along the way, and the information is provided to the home buyer along the way. So that's that category, and I'll pause to see if anybody has any questions. Go for it, Jerry.
I want to mention a difficulty on one part of this in terms of DEI, that, for instance, in Josephine County, the African American population is about 1%, and Native American population about 1%, although I think that's undercount. And the Hispanic population is less than 10%. So the biggest underserved group we have is poverty. And we have a lot of that. We're one of the poorest. But in terms of new organizations such as ours, our nonprofit, the challenges for me as a president of a board trying to recruit board members, I'm reaching out to various groups and the Native American tribes and all the different groups in the area, but it's a lot of work to build that out. And I hope that you all understand that, because I wouldn't want to see organizations rated based on unrealistic attainment goals.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback. And we know it's different by region, so we wouldn't expect, you know, goals to be comparative in the Portland region to Josephine County. And I think, Jessica, if you go back, we're looking to see that you have a targeted plan for who you're serving. We will look at, and you know, not all of these categories you have to hit again, because there's a minimum threshold, but it doesn't mean that every project needs to be serving home buyers with an AMI below 80%, or that every project paid their community members for their time and consultation. So we know it's not possible to meet all of these things. And, you know, we want a diversity of AMI for our projects. So it's not counted against you if you're only serving 80% AMI, just using that example. For the target populations or track record, we'll look at county demographics and see if the track record, you know, matches or exceeds the demographics for populations that have been underrepresented in homeownership. And then I'll also just say, you know, underrepresentation is not necessarily, I mean, we know that people of color have been excluded from homeownership in a very structural way, but there are also other communities that, you know, are non-racially related that have been excluded from homeownership as well. So target population is a broad term. So we're just looking for you to identify that. Okay, we can go to the next category. So the next one is financial viability, and this these questions here will not be questions that you're answering through narrative. Again, these are basically you're filling out a pro forma and showing us your sources and uses. So you can look again at our website from last year, the NOFA from last year, to get a sense of what that will look like. We'll probably be making some updates, but we're looking to see, is the majority of your project financing committed? So, you know, you'll get more points if the more funds that are already committed. Does the project leverage other sources? Is the project cost effective and comparable to similar projects in the area? That we're looking for feedback on. We've used RS Means as a data source for this in the past and know that it's been a pretty blunt tool. So we are looking for another data source that's a little more regional that can help us compare your project costs to similar projects in the area that you're building. So if anybody has suggestions. And then we're looking to make sure that your pro forma, you know, isn't just 3 line items, but it's detailed and it matches the construction bids or estimates that you provide, and that you've done some market volatility or cost off-run planning. So this is a narrative question of what measures are you taking besides budgeting for escalation and contingency to ensure that your budget and schedule will stay on track, knowing that we can only really invest in projects once. So your LIF funds are all that you can rely on from OHCS. We don't often have other sources of funds to add on to your project if the budget changes. And then are you budgeting for escalation and contingency? And that's not a requirement, but you will get points for meeting a minimum of contingency and escalation. And there is a maximum for those as well. So maximum contingency is 5% and maximum escalation is 10%. Jackie.
Hi. Hi. So about escalation and contingency, sometimes banks and even us as developers will want to hold higher contingency for some reason. What we have to do with this OHCS application is like hide the contingency in different areas. And we'd rather not do that. We'd rather be honest and say, you know, this earthwork is going to be significant, or this, you know, the civil is going to be unknown. We want to hold X more contingency. I think that would be very helpful to reflecting actual pro formas compared to pro formas just for this application.
So our contingency is 5% right now. And I think that's just like what is in the OHCS general practices manual. Is there a threshold that you usually find yourself in your pro formas?
I can do an analysis and send that to you, but I would say that right now, like, you can't show anymore. So let us show more and maybe explain why. I think the cap on the pro forma is challenging because then my pro forma doesn't reflect my actual pro forma. So I'm just inflating other areas.
Okay.
And I'll put it in the chat. I'll look while folks chat about what we're looking at.
Sarah, I see a hand.
Yeah, so I was going to ask whether the budget is just the budget comparative to comparable to other average costs. Is that looking at vertical construction? Because that feels like you can kind of compare apples to apples, but the site work varies a lot depending on obviously the site and where the utilities are located and what the grade is. So that seems like it should be kind of parsed out. And then the only other point I was going to make is that as we try to do more and more energy efficient builds and add solar potentially, that's going to increase our building costs. Hopefully we can get other sources of funding to offset that. And it's certainly going to translate into cheaper utility and maintenance costs down the road, but we wouldn't want to be penalized for that.
Thanks, Sarah. Joseph, I think you're next.
Yeah. My question was on that point as well, about the budget comparative to average building cost of similar homes in the region. Is that information that OHCS is already going to have on hand as they do their evaluation, or is the applicant going to be expected to supply that as well?
That would be an index that we use. Yeah, so the applicant would be expected to supply that.
Oh, understood. Okay.
Great, let's go to the, and yeah, to your point, Sarah, I think that's a, comparing apples to apples more that's a very helpful point. All right, let's go to the next slide.
All right, this one's me. Okay. In this section, we essentially want to ensure that this project will be beneficial to your locality, your home buyers, and the neighborhood or community you're building in. And we want to award points for innovation or going above and beyond minimum requirements in your construction. So the first category is your project design. Here, we essentially just want to make sure that your project fits with the neighborhood you're building in. I know I've heard more than a fair share of complaints about, that one modern house in the middle of a classic neighborhood, or those houses that are mostly a garage facing the street in a neighborhood that mostly has large front porches. But in general, if your construction plan generally blends in with your surrounding neighborhood, or if your project doesn't have a surrounding neighborhood, you'll get points. And then you can receive additional points if you've gone above and beyond to make sure that your development enhances the community or facilitates community in some way. Geographic target area is sort of our way of awarding points for building somewhere your locality wants people to build. We don't want to call out any specific types of areas or favor any specific geographic boundaries. But if you're able to provide evidence that your area or the site, the area that you're building in, is of a specific interest to your city or county, et cetera, we would like to support that. We want to award some points if your project is bringing any additional services to the community. That could be anything from a mixed use development to a park to employment services, or even major environmental cleanup on your site. You'll get points if these services are for the home buyers in your project, and additional points if they would be accessible or beneficial to the broader community. We want to ensure that your development is near amenities for your home buyers. You'll be able to get points for each amenity within half a mile or 1 mile for rural, and fewer points for each amenity within 1 mile or 2 miles for rural. This mileage is sort of taken from other NOFAs and the general definition of walkable, but we're happy to hear your feedback on if that's the right size for your communities. And I just want to reiterate that this is one of many ways to get points in this category, so we wouldn't expect every amenity to be within this distance. Our innovation, efficiency, and replicability categories are being merged into a single narrative where you can tell us all the cool things that you're doing and get points. We'll give the most points to established innovative practices that you've adopted, but we may still award points even if the practice you've adopted is only really innovative to you and your organization. Finally, the additional site specifics is kind of a roundup of miscellaneous items that we'd kind of like to encourage you to include and that we think you would deserve points for if you incorporate them. Right now, this includes climate resilience standards above the Oregon Development Code, solar implementation, all electric appliances, accessibility, and if this is the second phase of an existing lift development. We're also happy to hear any other ideas that you might have that you think you might deserve some points for. So I see Sarah's hand is raised.
I'll be brief because this is like my personal soapbox, but I love a lot of modern architecture, and like I wouldn't want to be penalized. I mean, and I also don't think that affordable housing and like innovative or new architecture should be mutually exclusive. And I would hate to be penalized for like, I mean, some neighborhoods are like have a lot of bad architecture, and do we have to contribute to that in order to score well in this category?
I didn't mean to insult modern architecture in general.
No personal offense taken.
The idea behind this was basically, is your development lifting up the neighborhood and not taking away from like the history or the beauty or the community building of the neighborhood? If your development makes sense, if your houses are beautiful and innovative, I think that's valid in this category as well. Yes, Jerry.
Well, I want to bring up a kind of ugly topic, which is that there are many of us who believe we've not reached peak fire, and that we are going to see more and more fires invading our communities. And I've personally lived through the Oakland Hills fire, the Coffee Park fire in Santa Rosa, and watched very closely the Talent Phoenix fire here. I'm a part of the fire district here in the Illinois Valley. For those who are interested in it, the reinsurance companies are now saying they are going to start excluding hurricanes, tornadoes, and fire from their home insurance policies. Without a homeowner's insurance policy, you can't get a mortgage. So these are really, really challenging questions that I urge you to look very closely at. We are only building out of concrete with no wood whatsoever because we don't want to face that problem, and our buildings are cheaper to build than wood. So I think that it would be really worth taking a very hard look at that question. Some cities in Oregon are now saying, don't build with wood. The other thing is that the sprawl effect is very, very serious because many of our cities are running out of capacity for sewer and water. So you have to go multi-story, and I know that displeases some NIMBY groups who want to see everything just the way it was. But we can't do that anymore. It won't work, and we won't have the sewer and the water for it.
That's really great feedback. For the fireproofing, is that a commentary that is against the project design item, or is that that additional points should be offered for specific fire rating and fireproofing, or both?
Well, I don't know how you would take it. I kind of think that it really is a sad thing to spend our treasure on things that are going to burn down, plus the number of forests that have to be cut down to build them out of wood. Wood is right now about $375 per square foot, and our concrete buildings are about $300 or $311 per square foot. So I'm saying, I believe this is where Oregon needs to go. And I'm doing a lot of advocacy about that to say we need to build up, not out, and we need to build fireproof and quake proof. So, you know, that's not everybody agrees with me.
All right. Well, it sounds like we probably need to rethink that project design section, and I'm happy to look into that too. So thank you all for that feedback. Any other commentary on any of the other project details? All right, then I will move us forward.
Okay, last category. This is a lot, so apologize. Thanks for bearing with us. This is a new category. We're just looking to ensure that the homes will, there's a plan for stewarding them into the future. So mortgage availability, a resale formula is in place. You have a logical methodology for coming up with the home sales price. We will be looking at who is the intended stewardship entity. So are you partnering with an experienced steward? Are you doing it in-house? What does that look like? We want to see that your ground lease template is in place, and you know, extra points if it's already been approved by attorney or resembles was pulled from the Grounded Solutions templates, and then that there's a data tracking system in place. You know, a lot of CLTs use Homekeeper. I don't know if folks on the call are using that. Really, any type of system is fine, even Excel, but we just want to make sure that there's a system and plan for the stewardship of these homes beyond the construction period. Any questions on this one? Okay, great. We have a few more things to cover, but that's it for the criteria. So hopefully when the application is released, nothing is a surprise here, but we will be going back and revising some things based on feedback. Go for it, Jessica.
Sorry, I thought our big questions and comments slide was after that one. All right. Well, we're very grateful for all of the great feedback that you gave us today. As we've stated before, we'll send this presentation around if you want some more time to read and digest and think, and then send us more comments if you'd like. We are getting towards the end now, so I just wanted to quickly discuss some additional expectations. This is what support will be offering you through the NOFA process. Or the first is what support will be offering you through the NOFA process. So we're considering another potential partner call in December with NOFA updates. We'd like to hear from you on if that's something that you might want, or if that's just too many meetings with us and you're happy to wait for the actual NOFA to come out in January. We'll host some NOFA information sessions in January, and then since this isn't a competitive NOFA, we'll also be able to offer one-on-one feedback. We'll likely manage that through office hours and regularly monitoring our HO development inbox. We'll also be posting questions to our website, since we're sure a lot of you probably have similar questions. If your application is not approved on your first submission, we'll be able to let you know what could improve in your application, and in most cases, you can resubmit one additional time during this NOFA cycle without needing to repay the application fee. We do reserve the right to fully deny an application if we have any serious concerns. With this being a first come, first serve application process, we've had to put some thought into how we may equitably handle multiple applications. Essentially, we don't want a handful of large projects from only a few developers to get all of the funding. So based on feedback during our last meeting, we did learn that most of you will still be submitting in the first quarter of the year. So we won't restrict the number of applications you submit. Instead, during that first quarter, we'll ask you in the pre-application to prioritize your projects. We'll review all of the first priority applications first in the order received, then the second priority applications in the order received, etc., until either everything is reviewed or all of the available funds are expended. And then in the second and third quarters, we'll move to just simply normal first come, first serve without any prioritization. I see Jackie's hand is raised.
Thanks. That really actually answered one of my questions. But my other question is, I know there was discussion a while ago about like lift sunsetting. And I just want to, because there's no limit on applications, want to dive into, does OHS plan to have future rounds of lift?
Yes.
Yeah, lift is not going away. We're getting more Article 11 coupons than ever. There is, someone asked us in the beginning, there is the 40 million is for 2024. If we can show that there is demand for that 40 million in 2024, then we have another 40 million reserved for us. That's not under homeownership right now, but it can be released once these funds are used for 2025. So for the rest of the biennium.
So from like a coalition advocacy point of view, you all want folks to apply with as many projects as possible, recognizing they're all done within your 3-year timeline. Is that still a rule?
Yeah, we want as many applications that are ready and feel like able to comply with the to take on the lift requirements to apply. And the point of the rolling application is to give you all more time to get your pipeline ready during this year and utilize the 40 million that we have.
Yeah.
Okay, and last question. So if folks are applying on a rolling basis, are we going to be awarded on a rolling basis, in the sense that I could expect an award if I apply in the first quarter much earlier than historically awarded?
Yeah, actually, Jessica, do you want to pull up the slide from last time that shows a little bit about, we've come up with some minimums of what we expect our timing to be. It should be at the end of this same PowerPoint presentation. But we've come up with minimums of when we expect to be able to do reviews by. So if you submit by March 4th, we would we would commit to reviewing by May and have Housing Stability Council determinations by May. And these are just minimums, so it kind of depends on our capacity. And you know, the quarter one might be a lot of applications to review at once. And then after that, we might be able to just be very responsive to applications and get an approval back to you the next month. So at minimum, we'll be reviewing, we will be going to Housing Stability Council for their determination at least 3 times. So you would get an award letter at different times depending on when you submitted.
Thank you.
Amy asked in chat, are scattered site applications allowed in this NOFA? Yes, scattered site applications will be allowed, but I think we're going to think through a definition on scattered site applications, so that we don't have, 5 houses in 5 different cities. So we need to define a geographic distance that qualifies as scattered sites as opposed to separate projects.
If I could make a comment on that, I used to do scattered site over several cities, and it worked very well with the home program. So if there would be a way to include it in one project, because everything's getting done at the same time, you're likely to use multiple contractors, multiple architects, multiple people, and get the work done at the same time. I think I would, yeah, that's just my 2 cents, sorry.
Okay. Is the reason for combining them, even if they're across multiple cities, mostly for pro forma and loan purposes? Is that the benefit from doing that?
No, I don't necessarily think so. I'm just curious why you would limit it.
I think the discussion on limiting,
Here's an advantage to where it does make sense. I'm in Portland, but if I get somebody wants to partner with me in a rural area, I could do scattered site in rural area at the same time that I do in Portland, and maybe it would help that rural area score better and give that developer or that agency more capacity.
that's fair. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think we might have been discussing that as a reason related to project limits, but since we're not doing project limits this application cycle, it might not be as applicable as it has been in the past. So we'll think more about that too.
Makes sense, thanks.
Yeah, Jessica, this is Amy. The question I was asking for a specific project where the two sites are within a half mile of each other, but we would be developing them in tandem as one, even though they're not connected.
Okay. Yeah, that would, within a half mile would certainly be appropriate.
Yeah, well, that's a lot easier than filling out two separate applications.
Sarah Radcliffe?
Yeah, just looking at this calendar, I was going to mention I had a conversation with our director of pre-development, and she was like, why don't we apply for funds in the fall, close in the early spring, and then be ready to start construction like late spring during the dry months, so that we can like really maximize our construction and site development during the dry months. Which makes a lot of sense in the climate that we live in. So I just put that out there. I mean, I guess with the rolling application process, we could try to kind of shift our schedule that way and work with that, except for with the first come, first serve allocation of funds, there's a little more pressure to apply sooner, but just kind of putting that out there. I'm not sure if like the funding side is really like thinking about the seasonal nature of construction. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I also think that this year will definitely be kind of our experiment to see how many applications we will actually get in that first quarter, and if having it available after that even makes sense, if everyone's just going to apply in January and all of the funds will be expended. I also do think it's a good reminder for the rural, emerging, and small developer set aside that will be available until June. So that might be available a little bit longer for those smaller organizations. But yeah, I think this will be, it'll be interesting to see what our schedule of applications look like. And then I think we'll be able to plan better going into the next years.
So we only have a couple more minutes, so I just wanted to share some upcoming things that we have planned in homeownership. So we will post these slides to our website, and I'll just put the link to where it's posted. And so you have access to this information, and if you want to process it a little bit more, we welcome any additional feedback. You can email us at our homeownership development at hcs.oregon.gov, or email Jessica directly or anyone on our team. We are expecting to also come out with some new guidance around how LIFT loans can be compatible with Fannie Mae. And so these are mortgages for home buyers. We've officially gotten approval to move forward with a bulk waiver process. So this really impacts the lenders that you'll be working with, but we'll come out with some information about that. And we hope to host a forum with Fannie Mae, and we'll be sending out more information about that. But our hope is to schedule something soon for the end of October. They might get moved into November. We are also looking at getting together a panel of lenders to talk about ITIN lending, maybe for November, December. So if you have any suggestions of lenders or partnerships that you found really great, that have opened up access for people that have an ITIN number, let us know. And then we also have our big homeownership programs partner call in December 7th. And so that's not just with homeownership developers, but with a host of our homeownership partners. And we're willing to, this feels like a lot of things that we're inviting you to. So we're willing to host another session on the NOFA as we finalize things and just get additional feedback, or just share out if people find that useful. So maybe if folks want to give us a thumbs up or thumbs down if you think that would be helpful. Yes, I will put that link in the chat. Let us know. But those are the things we have ahead. And Jerry, I see you have your hand up.
I wanted to ask if are you still considering the idea of helping people with their down payment for some of the loan programs? Because my experience in talking with many people out in our county is I hear all the same thing, which is people have enough credit score and everything else to qualify for a loan, but they can't come up with the down.
Yeah.
And even if we're talking about an FHA with 3.5%, it's still a challenge for a lot of people. So I'm wondering if that is still in the cards.
So Jerry, we have 2 different programs in our division that focus on down payment assistance. So let me follow up with you afterwards with information on those programs.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. If you have a second, we have one more question for you. Is there a language you want to see some of the forms directly targeted to home buyers translated into that would be helpful for the specific populations you work with? So feel free to put that in the chat. We may also follow up with you with that question. And we just really appreciate everybody's feedback today. You've given us a lot to think through and amend what we've been working on for the better. So thanks so much for your time. I know it was a longer meeting, and we look forward to seeing you all and talking with you in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.